friends, my name is Aaliyah. Welcome back to my channel, Aaliyah Uncharted, or welcome if you're new. Today I'm going to be doing a fun video. I'm going to do the 2020 reading survey. So just kind of giving a nice overview of all of the books that I read over the course of 2020. And I'm really excited about this. There are a lot of books that I haven't mentioned on my channel yet that I really wanted to get into a little bit. So I'm glad I finally have this opportunity to tell you about all the books. So I don't know who made the first reading survey video, but when I find out who made the first one, I will link the original video down in the description if you wanted to take a look at it, see other people who've done it, and if you want to do it yourself. So anyway, let's just get into the questions because there's a lot of them. Okay, so to start off, just some stats. How many books did you read in 2020, and did you meet your reading goal? So yes, I did. So my reading goal was to read 50 books in 2020 and I read 60. So we exceeded it by 20%, which is super fun and exciting. I'm really happy with that number and just knowing that I read a lot of good books in 2020. So yeah, I'm feeling great about it. Okay, so next up is, sorry, I'm reading it off of my computer, don't mind me, is my most read genre of the year, and I read exactly one third contemporary novels. So I read 20 contemporary books, and that's spread across both adult and young adult, and I think the one middle grade book that I read in 2020. So yes, mainly contemporary, which is not surprising to me. And my second, I should have looked this up. My second highest is sci-fi. Sci-fi. I was not anticipating that, to be perfectly honest. I mean, it makes sense when I'm like thinking about it, but I did not realize I read that much sci-fi this year. I read 10 sci-fi books in 2020. And now that I'm thinking about it, I did. And obviously, and but they were really good. So I'm really happy with that. And I know it's not a genre, but I do want to point out, since this is a goal of mine every year, that I did read over half of my reads were queer books. So over half, 32. So just over half of my books were queer books or had LGBTQ plus main characters and or themes. I'm always happy to have that number go higher, but I'm feeling pretty good about just over 50%. So feeling good about it. So next up are the longest and the shortest books I read in the year. And the shortest I'm going to keep the same, but I'm going to kind of differentiate between longest audio and print book, just because I listened to a whole lot of audiobooks this year. My longest print book that I read in 2020 was Call Down the Hawk by Maggie Stiefvater. This is the first book in the Dreamer trilogy, which is a sequel / companion series to the Raven Cycle. And that book is 472 pages. So that was the longest one I read in print with my eyeballs. And the longest audiobook, I did not realize this was that long, is #Rev by Cambria Hebert. This is a new adult male-male romance. And I feel like I did not realize it was that long of a book. And I feel like it's not even the longest audiobook I listened to, like hours-wise. So I'm not sure how that calculates. But according to Goodreads, the number of pages, it's the longest. So take that for what you will, I guess. And then my shortest book was Opal, the novella by Maggie Stiefvater, which I actually read in anticipation for Call Down the Hawk. So I guess that is nice and related. Okay, so the next question is my favorite 2020 release, which is going to be a difficult question for me to answer this year. I'm not somebody who normally reads a whole lot of new releases. I generally read a lot more, God, what is the word? You know, books that have been published already for like at least a year. I read mainly those. But this year I read a lot more than normal. I read a total of 16 new releases this year, which again is way more than my average. And so to pick one is hard already for me, but also because 15 out of those 16 new releases were either 4 or 5 stars for me. So I really picked some really great new releases this year. So I think I'm going to have to try to narrow this down, although it's going to be very difficult. So first one I have to mention is The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. You're going to see this probably a lot because, spoiler alert, this is my favorite book of the year. And I loved it. It came out in the summer and I adored it with everything in me. A couple other favorite 2020 releases I want to mention are Loveless by Alice Oseman, which again is probably not going to surprise most people here. This is also like in my top 5 probably of the year. Felix Ever After is a favorite release of the year. Darius the Great Deserves Better by Adib Khorram. And last but definitely not least is Cemetery Boys by Aidan Thomas. This is just 5, but again, I read 16 new releases this year, which is still blowing my mind. And so aside from just general new releases, the next question is my favorite 2020 debut, which I guess I already mentioned, but Cemetery Boys by Aidan Thomas is one of my favorite debuts of this year. I read it in like the last couple days of 2020, and it was probably the best way I could have rounded out the year. So I'm glad that I finished it. My other favorite debut from the year would have to be Raybearer by Jordan Ifueko. This is a West African inspired fantasy, and it was just incredible. It was just super elaborate and interesting and just super different, and I really loved that book, and I'm really excited for the sequel whenever it comes out. If you want to know more about these books, I'll have them all listed in my description, so you can check them out. But I'm not going to go out of my way to describe any of these because we have too many questions. So on to the next one. So next is favorite books not published in 2020. Obviously, I have a good few. First, I needed to mention Darius the Great Is Not Okay by Adib Khorram. Obviously, I read the sequel also this year, and this is like one of the first books I read in 2020, and it still stuck with me. It's just so good. Another one, I'm like trying to navigate my piles of books right now. Get a Life, Chloe Brown was super good. It's like one of the only like just straight up adult romances I read this year, and it was excellent. I read both this and the sequel, Take a Hint, Danny Brown, this year. I liked this one marginally better, but they're both really, really good. I also wanted to mention The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. This is one of the sci-fi books that I really, really loved. Of course, I have to mention the one book I've done a review for on this channel, which is The Power by Naomi Alderman. It's funny because I've read so many more books now that this probably isn't like in the top of my favorites for the year, but it's still pretty impactful just in terms of all the stuff going on in here. So I really liked this. And then I have to mention Wolf Song and the whole Green Creek series by TJ Klune. You guys have heard me talk about the gay werewolves enough, so I'm not going to bore you with that, but I can't not mention them. Okay, so the next one is books that did live up to the hype. There were a whole lot of hyped up books this year, so that's not very surprising. The first one would have to be, I'm gonna have to dig it out. But first of all, Get a Life, Chloe Brown. I was seeing this everywhere, which is why I picked it up in the first place, and it so lives up to the hype. It was excellent, it was sexy, it was cute, it was just everything, and I liked it a heck of a lot. Another one that lived up to the hype was obviously Darius the Great Is Not Okay. This was also pretty hyped up. I especially got the hype from this, hype for this from Cece at Problems of a Book Nerd, and she has immaculate taste. The two others I wanted to mention that I think really lived up to the hype would be My Sister the Serial Killer by Oyinkan Braithwaite. I thought that was a really interesting thriller. And then Becoming by Michelle Obama. Definitely lives up to the hype. Even though memoir isn't really my jam, I can't deny that worth it. It was totally worth it. And on the other side, the books that did not live up to the hype. And first I'm going to have to mention The Storied Life of A.J. Fikry by Gabrielle Zevin. It was okay. I was disappointed, and it definitely did not live up to the hype. I know a whole lot of people on BookTube really love this book. A lot of people call it a favorite of theirs, and it is definitely not one of mine. I was pretty disappointed by it in general. The other one I wanted to mention is Sourdough by Robin Sloan. This is also one I was disappointed in, especially because I really loved the first half of the book, and then the second half less so. So I think these books were a little bit overhyped for me anyway. Question number 10. I haven't been counting, but this is question number 10. And that is my biggest accomplishment in 2020. And I would have to say my biggest reading accomplishment this year would have to be reading Becoming by Michelle Obama. I mentioned this before, but memoirs are not really my thing, which is funny because out of the 9 nonfiction books I read this year, 5 were memoir. So I don't know why I do this to myself, but I just don't tend to really like memoir a whole lot. But I still really wanted to read this book because I knew that she would have a whole lot to say. It would be a little bit different from some other memoirs that I have read and not quite enjoyed. And also I really love Michelle Obama. That being said, it was just really intimidating for me. And so I feel very proud of myself that I finally read it. Also, I will say I read this on audiobook, and the audio is great because she does the whole thing herself, and I cannot recommend her audio more. It's great. But yeah, I feel pretty proud of myself for finally tackling that one. Okay, so next up is favorite character. I'm really trying to narrow this down, but you're going to start seeing a lot of the same books over and over, just fair warning. But first one that I want to mention, this is not in any particular order, by the way, is Lister from I Was Born for This. I really loved his character, and whenever Alice Oseman decides to write her sequel to this, I will be so excited to see what happens with Lister. But I loved him. Could have used a lot more of him, but I think no matter how much I got of him, I would want more of him. He was just a really interesting character to follow. Another one is Gabrielle from Cemetery Boys. I loved him. I loved being in his head. He was just great. A couple others that we're going to do just really quickly would be Redford Morgan from Get a Life, Chloe Brown, Georgia, our main character in Loveless, and oh my gosh, there's so many of these. Darius from Darius the Great. Well, this is a sequel, but you know, Darius. And Linus from The House in the Cerulean Sea. I could keep going, but I need to stop. So next one is obviously going to be your least favorite character of the year, or characters. The first one I wanted to mention was Iola from My Sister the Serial Killer. I never get that title right on the first go. She was just really frustrating to me, and I just kind of hated her a lot. I know she's a very complex character, and so like I like her as a character, but like as a person, I really, really hate her. And I also want to mention that I hate almost every single person in Little Fires Everywhere, and I'm pretty sure that's intentional. Especially I don't even remember any of the characters anymore, but the white family, the big wealthy white family, all of them suck. I hate them. But again, I think you're kind of supposed to, so I don't feel bad saying that I hate them because you're supposed to, but also like, you know, that was the point. So I guess take that for what you will. The only other one I wanted to mention, and again, I think this is when you're supposed to hate him, but the dude in Convenience Store Woman, he was the worst. He was just the absolute worst, and I hated him. He was just, like, I don't want to say anything because I don't want to spoil anything in Convenience Store Woman, but he was just the freaking worst, and she deserved better. We're just gonna leave it at that. And then rounding off the characters is my favorite couple, or OTP. Again, we're going to try to lightning round this, but Chloe and Red in Get a Life, Chloe Brown were so good and so cute. Obviously, Yads and Julian from Cemetery Boys. I loved them. Red and Blue, and This Is How You Lose the Time War. For being like primarily science fiction, like this is one of the most romantic books I've ever read in my life. And I loved just watching their relationship, especially since you only get to really see it through letters. It was just, it was so good. Also, I have to mention Linus and Arthur. It's like relatively subtly done, because it's not like their relationship was a focal point, really, but it was really nice and it was really cute. And then lastly, I read this year, but I also didn't read this year. So I want to mention Heartstopper Volume 3, Nick and Charlie. I read the webcomic as it comes out, so I've been reading this for a couple years. So I read the physical book this year, which is why I can mention it, but I'm pretty sure I read a lot of the chapters before 2020. Either way, Nick and Charlie, they're really great, they're really cute, and I love them. Okay, next up is question number 14, best written book of the year. I have a couple for this, like all of these. First, I wanted to mention This Is How You Lose the Time War. I know that the writing style is not for everybody. This is very flowery, but also like, you know, it leans into really heavy sci-fi. We are getting really metaphorical, and I loved it. That kind of stuff is my jam. So I really loved how this was written. A couple other ones I really wanted to mention that I don't own, but Black Flamingo by Dean Atta. This is a book in verse, so it's a little bit different because, I mean, it is poetry, but it also is still really well written. I loved the way that the narrative flowed, and I have to say, like, if anything, you want to read it just for his final performance. It's so good. It's so good. So really loved that. And then the third one I wanted to mention would be The Deep by River Solomon. That one was also really, really well done. Definitely, it's not flowery like in the way This Is How You Lose the Time War is, but it definitely has a certain way of storytelling. And I know there are more articulate ways to explain it, but I don't have the words for it. It's really interestingly done. And yeah, I can't not mention that book. So The Deep, it's really good. Question number 15 is the books you push the most people to read. This is going to be no surprise to anybody. I say it's buried under books now. But the first one obviously would have to be The Power, since I did a whole review video on this. I probably pushed a lot of people to read this, or tried to at least. The other ones, I have to mention Green Creek again. So Wolf Song, Raven Song, Heart Song, all of the gay werewolf books. That's probably the series and the books that I mentioned the most often on my channel, especially considering I have a whole like 5 videos total. So this isn't surprising to anybody. Next up is favorite book cover, and I'm pretty sure all of these were ones that I mentioned in my mid-year freakout tag. Like every single one, but we're gonna mention them again. So House in the Cerulean Sea is one of my favorites. It just looks nice, you know, like it looks how it feels, if that makes any sense. I have to mention Felix Ever After. I just really love this cover, and I love his flower crown. It's just really nice. I'm a huge fan of these covers of the Wayfarer series. So The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, and then the rest of the books have a similar kind of vibe, and I just really love that vibe. And then lastly, I wanted to mention Darius the Great Is Not Okay. The second book also has a good cover, but I like this one slightly better, if nothing else than for the cityscape. Is that right? Is that the right word? For that in the background. It just, the whole color scheme, everything. I just really like it a lot. I just need to hold this up again. Book that made you cry. This is the only book that made me like actually physically cry this year. And I don't know if it was the book itself or if it was just how the audiobook was done, or both. I think it was probably both. Anyway, this is the only book that just straight up made me cry this year. It was so good. Not like sad, but I mean, it was kind of sad, but not like tragic, you know? It was like I related too hard is what it came down to. And if I haven't sold you to read this yet, read it. So the opposite would be Book That Made You Cry. And so I have to say the Brown Sisters series, this one and Take a Hint, Danny Brown, are both just, I mean, they're really nice romances, but also they're really funny. Like Chloe in particular, she is so funny. Like I love her snark and her sense of humor. It's just, like her and Red, like just their whole dynamic. It's so good. Like I was definitely laughing out loud. Like this is just, it's funny and romantic, and that's the kind of romance I want. So it worked out really, really nicely for me. Question number 19 is my new favorite author. At this point, I feel like it's relatively obvious. That would be TJ Klune, author of the Green Creek series and House in the Cerulean Sea. I read 5 books total by him this year. So this, the 3 books, or the first 3 books in the Green Creek series, and The Extraordinaries, which was his YA debut. And I just really love his writing. I really love his characters. He's also one that can just write sincere characters and sincere relationships and moments, and then also have it be just, he's also a really funny author. So I also enjoy his sense of humor in his books. Have to say I definitely prefer his adult fiction over his young adult fiction, but definitely a new favorite author of mine, and I will be reading more of his work for sure. Question 20 are my guilty pleasure reads. We're just gonna get out of the way. The Green Creek series, yes, it's a guilty pleasure, and I don't care. They're great. The other ones I wanted to mention would have to be #Junkie and #Rev by Cambria Hebert. These are, again, a new adult male romance. It's technically a series. I'm not interested in reading the rest of the books in the series because we're following different characters and I don't care. But these first 2 just follow the same couple, and they're trashy. They're cheesy as hell, but I enjoyed them. They're definitely a guilty pleasure read for me. Almost to the end of the list, luckily. But my favorite reread of the year. And I normally reread more than I did this year. I only reread one thing this year, and that was Opal, my shortest book, which is a novella that is in between the Raven Cycle series and the Dreamer trilogy. And so I reread this again to like in preparation for reading Call Down the Hawk. Yeah. Okay, and so then we've got my best nonfiction of the year. So I have a couple I want to mention. First, Becoming. I feel like that's kind of obvious at this point. I think it was really excellent. On the memoir front, I do want to mention Genderqueer. So I think I've realized that if I want to read a memoir, I want it to be a graphic memoir. Because I loved how this was done. I loved the illustrations in this are great. So Maya Kobabe is just a really great author, and I think this was done really, really well. So I really recommend Genderqueer. And then the last nonfiction I wanted to mention would be Hood Feminism by Mickey Kendall. This was just a really excellent exploration on intersectionality and feminism, and how feminism needs to incorporate a whole lot more than what a lot of like mainstream white feminism thinks it does. So I thought that book was also really, really, really good. So yeah, those would have to be my top nonfiction of the year. Okay, last but not least, question number 23 is, were you happy with your reading year? And I have to say, yes. My bed is covered in really great books that I loved this year, so I can't say no. And I read way more books than I thought I would. I had a whole lot of new favorite books this year. Like, I think I had 17 5 stars, which, again, like, proportionally, that's like almost a third, which is really good. Like, that's really good. I'm feeling very happy with my reading year. I tried to branch out a bit in terms of genre, and I read a lot of really, really wonderful things, and I enjoyed myself immensely. So definitely cannot complain. Okay, so that was a lot. Sorry again if I was talking really quickly. I was definitely just trying to churn this out. But Yeah, I really enjoyed doing this. This was a lot of fun just to do a nice breakdown of my reading for 2020. Again, I'm going to have the list of books down in the description, as well as a link to my Goodreads if you wanted to see just the full list of books that I read in the year, what I rated them, that kind of thing. That will all be in the doobly-doo. And so if you have any opinions on any of these books, or just want to let me know what your favorite, least favorite books of the year were, anything like that, I would love to hear about it. So go down to the comments and chat with me. If you like this video, please hit like, and if you want to see more from me, hit that subscribe button, and you probably will. That's all I got for you guys today, though. Thank you so much for stopping by and hanging out with me. I really appreciate it, and I will talk to you guys in the next one. Bye!